Okay, let's continue with Smoky the Crow. Smoky was a big crow now. Peter and Carol did not have to work to take care of him. He could take care of himself. So Peter and Carol had time to do other things. One morning, Carol said, "Peter, we have not gone to the woods for a long time. I would like to go. I would like to go to the old house on the other side of the woods." "All right," said Peter. "We will go. We will take Pat and Smoky." They started across the green fields. Soon they came to the woods. It was good to get into the woods out of the hot summer sun. "Look, Peter," said Carol. "Here's the spot where we got under the branches to hide from the crows." "Yes," said Peter, "and here's the log where we sat that day." "Smoky was a little crow then," said Carol. "Now look at him. Smoky flew from tree to tree in the woods. It was fun for him." Pat ran through the woods and had a good time, too. "Pat is looking for crows," said Peter. But there were no crows to be seen. Peter and Carol found Pat with his nose in some old brown leaves. It was the spot where they had first found Smoky. They looked up at the crow's nest. Not a crow could be seen. Not a crow could be heard. The woods were as still as could be. "Come on," cried Carol, and away she ran. Peter and Pat ran after her. Smoky flew on and sat in a tree and waited for them. Through the woods went Peter and Carol and Pat and Smoky. They came out at the other end of the woods. There was the old house. It was many years old. Let's take a look at that. There it is, see? They've come to the end of the woods and they see that really old house there. "It's a queer house," said Peter. "That is why I like to come here." "It was not queer to the people who once lived in it," said Carol. "The old house was made of logs. It took hard work to make that house. Trees had to be cut down and logs made from the trees. Then the logs had to be put one on top of another to make the house. The house was old now. People had not lived in it for many years. Only birds and squirrels lived in the old house now. Rabbits ran in and out of the green grass. Carol picked some blue and yellow flowers in front of the house. Then Peter and Carol went into the front door of the house and looked in. The door stood open, but there was no one in there to say, 'Come in.' Carol started to go in, but Peter said, 'No, Carol, you cannot walk on that floor. That floor's too old. You might fall in it and get hurt.' All Carol could do was to look through the windows. 'I could make up a story about the people who once lived in this house,' she said. Smoky sat on Peter's arm, but Pat ran all around the house. Just then Peter saw Pat jump over a fence at the back of the house. 'Here, Pat,' called Peter. 'Come right back here. Don't go in there.' Peter called to Pat again. Then he whistled. It was a long time before he got Pat to come back. 'Why does Pat want to go in there?' asked Carol. 'I don't know,' said Peter. There's an old well there. Father put a fence around the old well so the cows would not fall into it.' 'You stay out of there, Pat.' 'We must go home now,' said Carol. 'Come on, Pat.' Pat went with Peter and Carol, but he looked back at the fence again and again. There was something there he wanted to see. Carol picked more blue and yellow flowers behind the house. Then away they ran, Peter and Carol and Pat. But Smoky got home first because he could fly. That same day, Peter and Carol went to town with Mr. and Mrs. Long in the car. 'You must stay at home, Pat,' said Peter. 'Take care of Smoky while we're gone.' Smoky did not like this very much. He sat in a high tree and watched the car as long as he could see it. He flew back to the apple tree. He sat in the tree and made funny noises. Smoky seemed to have a good time these days, talking to himself. It was fun to talk to himself, but after a while, Smoky grew tired of it. He looked for something to do. Smoky looked for Pat, but Pat was not there. And here's another picture of Smoky flying, and maybe you can see Pat there running in the distance. Yeah. "Caw, caw," called Smoky, but Pat did not come. Smoky flew up on the barn. He could not see Pat anywhere. Then he flew up in the air. He could see better now. Yes, there was Pat, as you can see in the picture. Pat was on his way to the woods, and he was in a big hurry. Smoky flew after Pat as fast as he could go. Caw, caw, called Smoky. Pat was in the woods now. He heard Smoky call, but he did not stop. On he went through the woods until he came to the old log house. Smoky saw him jump the fence at the back of the old house. Then Pat was gone. Smoky flew to the fence. He looked everywhere, but he could not see Pat. Then he heard a noise right under him. Caw, caw, cried Smoky. Smoky heard Pat bark, "Wow, wow, wow, wow." But Pat seemed far away. He's going to be in trouble, you'll see. Caw, caw, called Smoky. Again came Pat's bark. "Wow, wow, wow, wow." Smoky flew closer to the ground. "Wow, wow," came the bark right under Smoky. But there was no Pat there. Down to the ground flew Smoky. "Caw, caw," he called as if to say, "You can't play tricks on me, Pat. I'll find you." "Bow wow," said Pat, but it was a very soft bark this time. At last, Smoky saw him. He was in a big hole in the ground. "Caw, caw," cried Smoky as if to say, "Come out, come out." But Pat could not get out. And here we're going to see him. There he is. He shouldn't have been doing this. He jumped over the fence and went down into the old well. And there he is, poor Pat. I hope they can do something about this. Let's see if they do. The big hole in the ground was the old well. Peter had made Pat come away that morning, but all day Pat had been thinking about it. There was something in that hole. Pat had come back to find out what it was. He came up to the side of the well. He put his nose down to smell. This time Pat got too close. The ground at the side of the well gave way. Pat fell in. Down, down he went. Leaves and stones fell with him. There was a little water in the bottom of the well. Pat picked himself up and shook off the water. Then Pat looked all around the old well. His nose could smell what his eyes could not see. There was a little rabbit in some leaves there in the well. That was what Pat had come to find out about. Pat did not care about rabbits now. He wanted to get out of that hole, but how could he get out? Pat heard Smoky. "Row, row," barked Pat. "Caw, caw," called Smoky. Pat could hear Smoky, and at times he could see him. Then he could not hear him. Smoky was gone, and Pat was all alone with the little rabbit in the bottom of the well. Peter and Carol were on their way home. They were happy as they came along the country road. They talked about things they had seen in the town. Then they talked about Smoky. "Father says Smoky may learn how to talk someday," said Peter. "Do crows talk?" asked Carol. "I think Smoky wants to talk now," said Peter. "Father says crows have to be a year old before they talk." "It'll be fun to hear Smoky talk," cried Carol. "We will help him learn to say all kinds of things," said Peter. They were almost home now. The car turned from the road and started up to Peter's house. "I don't see Smoky," said Peter. "Whistle to Pat," said Carol. "Pat and Smoky will be together." Peter whistled to Pat. The car stopped, and Peter whistled again. But Pat did not come, and Smoky did not come. "Father," cried Peter, do you think Smoky's lost?" "No," said Father. "Smoky and Pat are playing somewhere. They can't be lost." Peter and Carol called to Smoky. They whistled for Pat. They looked in the house. They looked in the barn. But they did not find Smoky, and they did not find Pat. "Mother," cried Peter, "Smoky is lost. He may never come back." "Find Pat, and Smoky will be with him," said Mother. "They are always together. They are not lost." They called to Smoky. They whistled for Pat. They looked everywhere. No Pat, no Smoky. They ran to Father. "Help us, Father. Something has happened to Pat and Smoky," cried Peter. Father stopped his work and said, "I don't want anything to happen to my dog. Pat is a fine bird dog. We must find him." Father whistled for Pat, but Pat did not come. And here are the kids See, the father was hoeing there. He was doing something important on the farm, and they come to him and they say, you know, we have to find Pat and Smoky. And so he stops and he says, yeah, I think we're going to do it. They're gone, Father, said Peter. Father whistled again and again. Father called to Mother, and they all started to look for Pat and Smoky. Just then they heard a caw. It's Smoky, cried Carol. Here he comes, said Peter. Look at him fly. He has been in the woods, said Father, but I don't see Pat. Come here, Smoky, said Peter. Oh, Smoky, you bad crow, cried Carol. Where have you been? But Smoky would not come to Peter, and he would not come to Carol. Smoky flew around and around over their heads. He called, caw, caw, again and again. Smoky said, Mother, what did you do with Pat? Yes, said Father, what did that crow do with my bird dog? Caw, 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 said Smoky. So he's trying to send them a message. Smoky would not come to them, and he would not be still. He flew near Peter, and then he started back to the woods. He flew close to Carol, and then away he went again. Caw, 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 he cried. I know, said Carol. He wants us to go to the woods. And here's the bird, the crow. He's going to take them back to the woods. They're all running because they know he knows something. Something has happened to Pat, cried Peter. Come on, Father. Away they went, across the fields and into the woods. Smoky flew on before them, as you could see in the picture. He had to sit on a fence or in a tree and wait for Peter and Carol to catch up with him. Then off he started again. Caw, 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 Smoky called. Hurry, hurry, he seemed to say. Father was coming too. Some of the time he ran, some of the time he walked. I can't run like Peter and Carol, Father said to himself, but I'll get there. What has happened to Pat? Smoky took Peter and Carol through the woods. On he went and came out at the other side. He's going to the old log house, said Peter. Peter and Carol ran and looked in the door of the old house, but they could see nothing. No, Pat had not gone through the old floor. Caw, caw, said Smoky. He did not stop at the house, but flew to the fence behind the house. Peter and Carol ran around the house. Then they heard, wow, 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 wow. It seemed far away. That is Pat, cried Peter. Smoky flew into a little tree on the other side of the fence. Again he called, caw, caw. Again Peter and Carol heard, wow, 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 wow. I know, cried Peter. Pat is in that old well. Run, Carol, and tell Father to hurry. Carol ran back and met Father. Peter climbed over the fence and pushed his way through the branches. I'm coming, Pat, he called. Row, 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 Pat called back. Peter got to the old well at last. He put his hands over his eyes and looked down like this. There was Pat standing in the water at the bottom of the well. Then Peter saw that Pat was not the only animal in the well. He saw the little rabbit. Peter heard Carol and his father coming. He met them and showed them the best way to get to the well. Pat fell into the well, said Peter, but I don't think he's hurt. What was he doing at the old well? Asked Father. There's a little rabbit down there, said Peter. Pat must have seen the rabbit there this morning. That's what made him to come back. Father took one look into the old well and said, Pat is all right. But how will we get him out? We could use a ladder if we had it. There's no ladder here, said Peter. I'll have to bring one from home, said Father. You and Carol stay here with Pat until I get back with the ladder. Don't stand too close, or you'll fall in with Pat. Peter and Carol sat at the side of the well and talked to Pat while Father went for the ladder. Smoky had something to say, too. He sat in a tree and looked down into the well and made his funny noises. My, he seemed to be saying, now, Pat, just see what you have done. Why did you go and fall into that old well? It was not long before Father brought a ladder. Father went down the ladder into the well. He took Pat in his arms. Pat was a big dog, and it was hard work to take him up the ladder. At last, Father's head came up to the top of the well. Pat climbed out into Peter's arms. I'm so glad you're not hurt, Pat, said Peter. Caw, 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 said Smoky. Wow, wow, said Pat. He was glad to be out of that old well. And here he is. And his father, he got the ladder down there. And he went down and got the dog, brought him up. And it wasn't easy, but he did it. Good for Father. Okay. Carol was looking down into the well. Where's the little rabbit? She cried. We must get him out too. Father put his hand into his coat, and out came the little rabbit. Here you are, Carol, said Father. We will not leave the little fellow in the well. I will come down here tomorrow and fill up that well, with dirt, of course, so no other animals can fall into it. Carol took the little rabbit. When they went by the old house, she put him down on the ground. He ran to the old house as fast as he could go. Down a rabbit hole he went. Smoky had gone on and was calling, "Caw, caw." "We're coming, old fellow," Father called to him, "and thank you for helping us get Pat out of the well." "Caw, caw," cried Smoky. "Crows are not so bad after all," said Peter. Father just laughed. But Peter and Carol knew Father was happy. Okay, that's the end of this section. Okay, see you next time. Okay, bye-bye.